Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tailosive Talks podcast live. Hopefully, this time YouTube is a bit more acceptable of the Starlink connection. Sometimes they are not. But good news, Starlink has been a lot more stable lately. The app used to say intermittent service in your area. It was basically like a big disclosure that was saying, by the way, expect the service to be a tad bumpy. And that little warning has now since gone away, which I haven't been documenting too closely, but for the most part, it seems that the connection's more stable, not dropping as often. But of course, this is all part of the beta experience. Once summer comes around, they get some more satellites up there, that should all be a thing of the past. But for now, just something we got to deal with in the meantime. Bob says no audio. That is not true. I think you have it muted, but I guess you can't hear me. So, yeah, it's showing up on my end. The Galaxy A series supports 3 years of OS updates now. Finally, a decent buy. Finally, were they not getting 3 years before? Man, I didn't realize 3 years was a selling point. Chris Otham says all good, my end. Michael Lazado. I know Michael. How's it going? He said hello from Winnipeg. Bob says, now I hear you. Okay. Well, something was up on your end because I did not mute myself at all. I'm just going to say live now on Twitter for the Talks podcast. There we go. Now the Tweeter people know. Twitter's fun. Twitter's probably, I must be honest, Twitter has a lot of issues, and there's a lot of things I don't like about Twitter, but it's probably my favorite social media. Likely because of how much information you can get there. Like, it's so easy to follow news agencies, but also follow people. Like, you can follow people you know and care about, while at the same time follow news agencies that post updates and stuff, and follow leakers if you care about that type of thing. There's just so many different things you can catch up with on Twitter in pretty quick time. And I like that some people don't like it, but I kind of like the less is more approach of the character limit. Just the fact that you have to keep your thoughts to a certain length, I think allows the platform as a whole to be more digestible, because you can just make sure that each tweet is pretty minimal. Just finished a run with the Galaxy beans in my ears. Oh, that's good. Hopefully the beans didn't fall out. Those soundproofing tiles just chilling in the corner there. Yeah, those are the old ones. Those are the ones that were all with the iPhone boxes before that everyone kept complaining about. And eventually I was just like, you know what? They're not really doing anything sound-wise. I just thought they looked cool, but now people only complain about them, which means they are literally doing the opposite of their intended purpose. So that's why when the new year came along, I was like, yeah, let's just take them down. Originally, I just wanted to have the iPhone boxes and nothing else, but my wife had these string lights, and she thought they would make a good-looking background, and I wasn't quite too sure of it, but we figured we'd try it, and people seemed to like it, so I'm like, okay, we'll just keep it that way. Did you watch the new Justice League? What do you think? I don't have HBO Max, and also I wasn't a huge fan of the first Justice League. I've heard of a lot of what people have said. I've seen a lot of comparisons of the new Justice League versus the old, and I don't know. I see a lot of people say they like it. They say a lot of people are enjoying the changes, but it is over 4 hours long, which is very, very long. But I can hardly get my wife interested in normal superhero movies, let alone a 4-hour one. So that's a long-term commitment that would be difficult to get both me and Louise interested in. The thing is, I know they've changed a lot of it, but it doesn't really change the direction the franchise is going between Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck as Batman, and I know there's a Robert Pattinson Batman now, so it's like the movie, fundamentally, I felt like the original Justice League kind of ended in such a weird way, and now knowing what happened with all those actors that have since kind of left the project, and now DC's just kind of up in the air, really. Just like, oh, I guess we're going to do some movies that aren't in the universe and some movies that are, and it sounds like all the movies that aren't in the universe are way better than the movies that are. So because of that, I'm like, I'm sure it's better. Like, I would not be shocked to watch the 4-hour Justice League and be like, oh, this makes way more sense than the original Justice League. But its place in the DC universe would probably be just as confusing. It doesn't really patch up the issues that universe had in the first place. And I still, with a passion, despise Batman v Superman. I rewatched that a few months ago with Wyatt for his birthday, and I I remembered how terrible the project was. And I've seen the Zack Snyder, director's cut of that movie, and I don't really have a huge track record of falling in love with Snyder's cut of things. If anything, I've seen Snyder's cut and been like, oh, that was kind of pointless. So that's likely what my reaction would be to watching the Snyder cut of Justice League. I'd be like, oh yeah, that was a little bit better, but overall kind of unnecessary. But I don't know. Some people are huge Snyder fans and really, really wanted Justice League to get some Snyder love, because I know what happened to Snyder, why he couldn't finish the original Justice League. It's a real sad story. And Joss Whedon had to take over. And at the same time, though, like, I totally get why Whedon cut down so much of the movie and had to make it like a lot shorter, because as much as you may enjoy it as a fan to go and watch like a 4-hour Batman v Superman movie and be like, whoa, this is so much better and the action is so much cooler and there's all these added scenes that are much better and stuff, like, they can't release a 4-hour movie. Like, financially, it's like box office destruction if you try to, because movie theaters can only show so many movies in a day. So if you release a 4-hour picture, that severely limits how many tickets they can sell, because instead of being able to premiere the movie 5 times a day, now you can only premiere it 4 times a day, because it's like 12 hours worth of runtime plus the time it takes to clean up the theater and let everybody get out and let new people get in. So yeah, I totally get why a studio doesn't want to release a 4-hour picture. It's very sketch, and you financially damage yourself heavily by doing that. So if you are going to do a 4-hour superhero movie, yeah, a direct to streaming is the way to do it, because you can pause it and you can take your time. Movie theaters are already struggling to stay alive at this point. So I totally get why they would make that an HBO Max only thing. But I just, knowing that there's not really much of a future with those characters, it severely prevents my interest in the movie. So that's why I'm probably not going to watch it. I don't have a way to watch it right now. I'm definitely not going to pay to watch it. Given if it was free, I would probably not really want to watch it. But Irad says, we can create a super successful cinematic universe with B-list superheroes. DC, we can't create a good universe with A-list superheroes. That's kind of what it feels like. I still need to see it. Isn't it good? I've heard good things, but I've lost so much interest in the universe itself and the characters that I don't. You don't have to convince me it's better. I've heard from several sources they think it's much better than the original, which I'm kind of like, the original kind of sucked, so it's not really that hard to be better. But yeah, maybe someday if it's available free somewhere. Let's see. What happened to your Intel video? Non-monetized? It is now monetized. I was planning on doing a vlog, but I guess some people are watching this. Essentially, I complained enough at YouTube about my Intel video. For those who might be out of the loop, Intel made these really cringy ads about why PCs are better than Macs, and I have no problem with someone making the claim that a PC is better for a Mac, because there are lots of examples and plenty of use cases in which a PC is better than a Mac, but the use cases they were coming up with were terrible, and Intel was kind of turning a whole marketing campaign into a PC versus Mac thing, even though many of the issues Intel has with the Mac have been present for years on Intel Macs, which show that, like, Intel doesn't really care if their product, which is the processor, is worse. They just don't like when another company uses a processor that's better than theirs, which is what Apple was doing. So I made a video complaining about the commercial and how I thought the arguments were weak, they weren't that funny, and Intel was coming across as desperate. But then that video, like the next day, I woke up and it was demonetized. And the crazy thing about it, I've had videos demonetized before. And typically it's just like, our system has flagged this as not suitable for advertisers. So you can request, typically, you can hit manual review, which means that you don't believe the system is correct. So you would like a human to watch the video and make sure that the system was either right or wrong. And this time, that's not what happened. This was the first time I got a video demonetized, and it legit said, a human has reviewed this video and deemed that it is inappropriate for advertisers for the reason of saying it talks too much about domestic abuse and child abuse and that kind of thing. Now that I'm saying this, they're going to demonetize this podcast. But basically, they labeled it for something that it was completely the opposite of. It was just a video about me complaining about a commercial, and they said that it was talking about dark subjects, saying this is abusive and that kind of thing. And I tweeted at them and I emailed them, and I was just like, this is so wrong, and you can't even specify any part of the video as being abusive. I know people make their jokes in there. They're just like, everyone's making the references of, well, you were so hard on Intel, I guess that was abuse. I know, it's funny, but you know what I mean. It's not actual abuse. It's not what the system is designed for. In fact, I think, not to brag too much, but I'm kind of the type of content creator YouTube should be fine with. The one that's not cursing, the one that is doing his best to not show material he doesn't own, like actively trying to make sure I only show my own footage and don't re-upload other people's footage. I'm trying to not step on any copyright boundaries. I'm following all of the community guidelines as closely as I can, and I've been following them for many, many years. I'm kind of what YouTube should be okay with. It's YouTubers that are pushing those boundaries and kind of making edgy content. Those are the ones they should probably pay more attention to. Someone like me who's just like, I like Apple products. I like Teslas. I'm not the creator they should be worried about. So to get demonetized by a human reviewer, I was like, what the heck? If I did something wrong, I need to know, because if it's that easy to set off the system and get a human to tell you you're going to get demonetized now, then I need to know what I said. I don't know if there was a reference I made that apparently is enough to get you demonetized or something. I don't know. But I've watched the video several times over, and I was like, I have no clue how this ties anywhere into what they're claiming is the issue. So obviously tweeted at them, emailed them, and it took them about 18 hours to finally turn it back on. But I guess a second person reviewed it and decided, actually, this is fine, and they remonetized it, which is funny because when I was talking to the customer support, not customer, I guess Google support, YouTube Studio has a little support button you can contact someone. When I told them, hey, your human made a mistake, my video does not qualify for anything you labeled it for, they said it cannot be changed, which I thought was funny. They were just like, no, there's no way to change that. It has to be, if it's labeled by a human as demonetized, we can't put it back. And then they put it back. So I don't I don't know what that guy knew, but I'm glad it's resolved now, but I'm still kind of annoyed because that video did pretty well. I mean, it wasn't like a viral video, but I got pretty decent views on it. And it was demonetized for a pretty long period of time, which I did the math. I'm not in huge trouble. I'll probably lose like $70 worth of ad revenue. I compared how the video performed to an other video that performed similarly that was around the same amount of time. So I probably lost about $70 based on that mistake, but it's not the end of the day. Still annoying though. You can imagine, like, if you were just walking around and you had $70 worth of cash in your pocket and you were running groceries or running errands or something, and then someone just took it out of your pocket and they were just like, it's $70. What are you worried about? You'd be like, hey, I mean, it's my $70. Come on. Like, and you took it for no reason. It's not like I was doing anything wrong. So it's not a lot of money, but it's the principle of the thing that's annoying. YB super chatted $3.50. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Maybe Intel secretly owns YouTube. Well, I know Google and Intel probably have certain ties, but I don't think that's what this was. I don't think it was any biased, we're going to demonetize. Because I am hardly the first channel to complain about the Intel ads. There have been many, many YouTubers that are saying how dumb they are. And I hadn't seen anyone else get demonetized. So I don't think that was the situation. But What do you think of a cheaper Apple TV to compete with Roku Fire Sticks? I thought they should get tvOS into more hands because some people just want a TV box made by Apple. Yeah, I've been for it for years, Jaden. I recall videos back in 2017 or 2016 even about they've been streaming TV sticks for a long time. Like they've been Amazon's been making little TV sticks. Roku has been making little TV sticks and pretty decent ones. It's not like you have to compromise much. There's a lot of cheap little sticks you can plug into the back of TVs that can still do 4K, that can still do HDR content. And you would think with Apple and their custom silicon team, they could make a little TV stick that was a lot more affordable. Okay, it's not going to be great at playing games, but just something that was really low powered but still could play high resolution content. And I'm kind of sick of TV boxes in general. Like, main reason I didn't want to keep my Apple TV is I don't like having a little box that I have to find a little shelf for that needs its own power supply. Main reason I love our Roku TV is that there's only one remote. There's only one power cable. I don't have to have a million things plugged in. It's kind of like a pet peeve of mine when different people have like their sound system needs all these power supplies and their TV needs a power supply, and then the thing that powers the TV needs a power supply. I'd rather just have one TV do everything, which seems more like the Apple approach, right? It kind of like the reason I love iMacs is because you have the screen, the computer, and everything just, and the speakers all built into one device. So I don't need a pair of speakers on my desk. I don't need a tower under my desk. I can just have one power cable that does everything. And today's tech video is kind of about having one Apple product that does everything. If my iPad could do all the advanced video editing and do the live streaming I need, that would also be awesome. If it's just the iPad does everything. So it's kind of my same approach of minimalism with the TV. I would rather have one screen that can do everything instead of like a separate box and a separate remote and everything. This is the remote for the TV. This is the remote for the Apple TV. This is the remote for the speaker system. I hate that. And so many houses these days are like that. Sorry, the sunlight is kind of all over the place today. It was really, really bright, so I didn't turn on any lights because I was just going to be like, hey, cool, natural lighting. But now a cloud went in front of this sun, so it went really dark. Turn that out. That's slightly better. It's a little bit moody. Okay. When do you think Apple will turn into a company like IBM? In my opinion, a change like this is inevitable. These are the glory days of Apple when they can sell virtually the same product every year. I don't know. I feel like IBM kind of missed out on a major technology upbringing, whereas Apple hasn't really quite yet. Maybe EVs, but that won't turn them into. IBM is just industrial business machines, right? Their main target. The IBM still exists. It's not like they went bankrupt, but their main customer base is all businesses, whereas Apple, I'm pretty sure, is going to stay in the consumer business. I think they might miss out on big industries like EVs or self-driving cars and that kind of thing, but they seem to be working pretty hard on it. They just don't feel confident enough to release anything, so. What if the new Apple TV is an actual TV with tvOS built in? Stefan, that has literally been a rumor for a decade now, which that's why I've always doubted it, because people have been asking for it for so long. And it's just, if Apple wanted to do that, they would have done it by now. I see no reason as to why they would just now start to enter the TV space, which is very saturated. It's a very crowded market of TV panels. And I remember reading reviews or not reviews, reports or leaks or rumors suggesting that Apple, I think it was way back in 2014 or something. Yeah, at some point they were hiring people that worked on TV panels before. And, anytime there's any kind of Apple hiring thing, everyone's like, oh, that's it. That's confirmed. Apple's definitely doing it. No, I would not buy one, most likely because it would be $5,000. Knowing that Apple sells a $6,000 Pro Display XDR, and that's a 32-inch display. If Apple made a TV, they would want it to be super extreme dynamic range with great brightness, and they would go overkill on every aspect of the design. It would probably be like those LG wallpaper TVs that are like extremely thin, and you need like 5 people to come to your house to install it because of how complicated the magnet system is. Which I don't care about TVs that are that expensive because the super cheap TVs are very good anyway. and I'm very happy with the $400 TV I bought 3 years ago. And I have no interest in replacing it. I legit have no complaints with that TV. The remote works great. The image quality looks fantastic. I love that the speaker system built into it sounds pretty great. And I have one remote for everything, only one power cable. It's perfect. It's exactly what I want out of a TV. Apple just happened to not make it. So if Apple could make some kind of really affordable, cheap 4K TV that had tvOS built in and everything, now that would be cool, but I doubt it. That doesn't seem like something Apple would do. Oh, well. Irad says, whoever is not in the EV game today, only for existing companies, will never be able to get into the EV game. Sadly, I kind of agree with you, Irad. I think that if Apple seriously cared about the electric vehicle market, they would have to be in it by now. And the fact that they're so behind everybody just by the fact that they're not building their own factories, which EVs are a very different market from smartphones. It's a lot easier to make a profitable smartphone than it is a profitable car. And the only way you're able to turn a profit with EVs is by being more vertically integrated like Tesla is. And that's why they're building all their own factories. And now they're going to start building their own batteries. And they're going to have all this software development for full self-driving, which means that if Apple wants to make one, they can't make it mass market because they're going to... Apple doesn't want to have thin profit margins. They've always made that very clear between... Now the sun's back out again. Apple doesn't want to have thin profit margins. Everything needs to be very, very thick on the hardware side of things. And they don't like having vertical integration with manufacturing. That's why they outsource with Foxconn and all that. So, yeah, if they wanted to make an EV, they would most likely have to do a Lucid Air style, like 6-figure, $100,000 premium vehicle, which, some people would probably buy it, but I see the lag, don't worry. Starlink's looking for a satellite. The connection will bounce right back. There it is. Anyway. What is stuff on saying? It would probably be a giant Pro Display XDR with tvOS. Yeah, probably would. I hope you can make a video on the new Toyota EV when it comes out. Yeah, if it's interesting. I mean, the EV channel is going to get very boring if I just tell you about every EV that ever gets unveiled. But if there's interesting attributes to the Toyota EV, I'd be happy to cover it. But the problem is it's going to become a more common thing. Like, the reason I chose Tailosive EV for the name and not Tailosive Cars was because I'm a futurist, and I think electric vehicles will be the norm in a few decades. And I knew that I knew that I would want to talk about EVs outside of Tesla, although, of course, Tesla is the main focus of the channel. I was still like, there's going to be other EVs that are interesting to me, but I couldn't imagine another car that's not electric that I would be interested in. So that's why I chose EV. But in the future, everything's going to be EVs. So making a video about every car that ever gets announced, it'd be like making a tech channel where you talk about every smartphone that ever gets announced. It would get old very quickly. It'd be like, oh my God, I can't keep up with how many different variants there are. So if there's an EV that really catches my eye, either because the price is good or the range is good or they do something unique that I wasn't anticipating, then I like to talk about them. But if it's just like new generic car that doesn't have great range and doesn't have great specs and the price is kind of high, is not really much of a point in talking about it. I have not gotten COVID that I know of. To be fair, me and my wife stay at home for extended periods of time. In fact, we got groceries yesterday, but when we were driving off from the house, I realized that we hadn't left the house for 5 days or 6 days in a row. We were leaving, and I started the car and everything, and I was just like, man, when was the last time we left the house? And we were trying to think back. We were like, man, I think it's been like 5 or 6 days now. So I don't get too much interaction with others, and because we don't spend too much time away from home, I've yet to be tested. So I haven't got a COVID test, and I don't know for sure if I'm negative or positive, but I'm just treating life and I'm treating my surroundings as if I have it all the time. So every time we go out, we wear a mask. Anytime we see the family, we wear a mask. We don't hug each other. We don't shake hands. We just keep our distance, and we try to keep any interaction with other people to an absolute minimum if possible. It's good that cases where I live are very low right now, which I'm happy to see. I've been keeping up to date with how many cases there are in my area, and we're at a record low for the past 7 months ago, I think, was the last time it was this low. We had a big spike in the wintertime, but it's all coming back down again. And I know a lot of people who have been vaccinated. I have not. We don't qualify yet. I want to get vaccinated, but we're not in the we're like the opposite of frontline workers. There's some people we know that work more directly with people all the time, and so they obviously got the vaccine first. But we're not ready yet. I guess we're not in the wave of people who are qualified to get it. So I'll get it as soon as I can. I want it like now, but I also have to time it a little bit differently because I get Cosentyx medication for my psoriasis. So I have to inject myself with medication, with needles and everything every month. So my dermatologist told me to space out the, what's it called, vaccine to be a little bit further away from the Cosentyx dosages. So I can't, well, I could. It's not like it'd be a huge deal, but I'm trying not to get vaccinated at the same time I get my Cosentyx prescription because he said it would be best to be avoided. It's not like I'm going to die if I get vaccinated and take my meds at the same time, but he said try not to. So let's see. Why do you think EVs will become the most prominent type of car? Doesn't the Prius Plus have only 18 miles of range from the battery? Yeah, hybrids are not the way to go. It's like commit, okay? Be a gas car, be an electric car. I think EVs will be the most prominent because they're overall much more simple than internal combustion engine vehicles. There's much less moving parts. There's much less parts in general. And the cost of ownership of an EV is far lower. The only reason they're not obviously replacing all gas cars right now is because EVs right at this moment are more expensive because they're newer. But the internal combustion engine has like over 100 years worth of ironing out the technology to make it cheap. Obviously, there were electric cars way back in the early 20th century, but the range was so bad back then and battery technology wasn't very good that everybody went with the combustion engine because the range was actually decent. With an electric vehicle, we're now seeing the point where we're seeing rapid decrease in the cost of batteries, and we're also seeing the price of a reasonable electric car, something like a Tesla Model 3. That's just like the standard because a lot of people buy it, a lot of people like it, and it seems to be selling pretty well, and it's dominating most of the markets it's in. That's just been getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper over the years. And now Tesla's laid out this plan, and now VW is laying out this plan, and several governments have been issuing these mandates of by a certain time, we're not going to need the combustion engine anymore. We're not going to want to use the combustion engine anymore because electric vehicles, as they get more economies of scale, as they're able to produce more of them, right now battery production is the main limiting factor. So it's not a matter of necessarily making the cars desirable enough because Tesla doesn't have a demand problem, but they do have the problem of they can't build batteries quick enough. If they could build enough batteries, they could have more, the more you sell something, the thinner the profit margin is you can collect on each one. So if they were able to build an infinite number of batteries, that's when they could start ironing out the economies of scale on mass production of EVs. And at that point, you'll start to see electric vehicles become the same price as ICE vehicles, except they'll be a fraction of the cost to operate because way less brake pads to replace, no oil changes, gasoline is infinitely more expensive and also way bad for the environment because you have to pull gasoline out of the ground, which requires energy. You have to move that gasoline somewhere else, which requires energy. You have to refine that. Oil to turn it into gasoline. I shouldn't be calling it gasoline when it comes out of the ground because it's not. The refinement process is a huge toll on emissions. And then after it's refined, you then have to drive it and transport it to every single gas station, where even if an electric vehicle is powered completely by a coal power plant, it's much better for the environment because the electricity used to send from a power plant to your car charging at a garage or at a charge station uses far less emissions and far less electricity is lost compared to taking oil, moving oil, refining oil, turning it into gasoline, moving gasoline, refueling gas stations. Way more steps in the process, which in return makes it much more expensive. And also, when you drive an internal combustion engine car, it's spewing out emissions. An electric vehicle, when you drive it, is not. It's not a completely zero emission experience because, of course, there were emissions in the process of building the car, mining the materials, and where the electricity comes from. But overall, it is substantially less. So in the long term, they'll become cheaper, and of course, the acceleration will be better. There's all kinds of perks to EVs. It's not a matter of making them desirable, but it's just a matter of mass production, which big billion-dollar companies are working on now. So we'll get there. Give it a few years. Let's see. Huawei software looks like iOS. Yes, it does. Daniel says, I got my vaccine on Tuesday because of my health problems. Oh, man, I hope you're okay. Hope it works out for you. Thick means that the product makes more money from the product. Yeah, it means it's profitable. Like, that's kind of the difference between Tesla and a lot of different EV companies, for example. Like, the Mach-E is a pretty compelling EV, but the reason Ford is only making a limited number of them is because they're not profitable. They require larger batteries that aren't and their powertrains aren't as efficient as Tesla's, and Ford would make much more of them if they could build them profitably, but they can't. In fact, there are certain brands, I think it was the Bolt, or I could be remembering wrong, but there have been certain major automotive brands that sell electric vehicles at a loss simply because they get EV credits by selling them, and they're just trying to tell the market, we know how to make an electric vehicle, we can make EVs, but the business is still relying on the sale of their combustion engine vehicles to stay alive. Those are the profitable ones, and then they just kind of do the EVs on the side. They're like, see, we know how to make an EV, but they're barely breaking even. In fact, they probably lose money on some of them, which is not good. It's not sustainable if you sell a bunch of EVs at a loss, which is why Tesla can't just lower their prices to $25K all of a sudden. They would go bankrupt. Daniel said, would you like me to send you a Milanese loop space gray strap? It's not Apple, but it looks nice. I thought you already did. I mean, I was very grateful for it, but I couldn't keep wearing it because, I mean, it looked cool, but it kept yanking my wife's hair out, and I was like, this isn't good. And it kept yanking my hair out. It was nice, but yeah, I couldn't wear it. You don't need to send me more watch bands. Don't worry about it. But thank you. I appreciate the offer. What is Starlink speed for you? So it changes a lot. That's the crazy thing about Starlink speed. People like asking, like, well, how fast is it? It's like, it depends. Certain parts of the day, it'll be north of 200. In fact, while it was raining, while I was in the middle of a hailstorm a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh man, I wonder if the bad weather makes Starlink perform way worse. I did a speed test. I'm looking for the tweet here. I've tweeted it back. Yeah. During a hailstorm, it was like 230 megabits down, which in my opinion is pretty good because during the beta period, they said Starlink would be between 50 and 150 megabits down. And I was getting 230. I was like, man, it's even faster than they said it was going to be. That's awesome. And there's some people that are posting in the Starlink subreddit. There have been a few people that have posting speed results over 300. One guy, I'm not saying you're going to always get speeds this high, but one guy was getting like 400. Not consistently, but occasionally when the signal is great and you're in an area close to a ground station, you can get really fast speeds. But depending on which ground stations are online and offline, speeds can vary a lot. So sometimes I'll run a speed test, and of course I've got a million devices on the Wi-Fi. I've got my iPad, my OnePlus, my iPhone. My wife is working on her laptop and she's watching videos on her phone. So, and we've got like 4 or 5 smart speakers on the Wi-Fi, plus my security cameras. So when you have a bunch of devices in use, they could be using a bunch of bandwidth or they might not be using any, depending on what's going on. Sometimes I'll run a speed test and it's like 50 down, 60 down. And within like a minute, I'll run another speed test and then it's back to 120. So satellite internet is not super reliable in general, but Starlink out of all satellite internet is probably the fastest, I would say. The reason I'm lagging and the reason I'm dropping frames on occasion here is because the Starlink dish is trying to stay connected as I speak, as I'm talking to you and streaming right now. It's trying to find different satellites to tap into. And that's why in the beta period, they've been very open and honest about how, hey, by the way, during beta, the speed's going to be a little bumpy. But as they add more satellites to orbit and as there's more coverage, they hope to get to the point where there's no dropouts at all, and the speed eventually gets up to around gigabit, they said is the end goal. The Starlink infrastructure is basically going to be designed to eventually reach gigabit speeds. Right now, somewhere around 100 to 200 on average, but eventually, Elon Musk said to expect the speeds to around double by the end of this year. So it will get better with time. There's not really a way it can get worse because they're just adding satellites constantly. In fact, there should be another Starlink launch in the next couple days. So it could be better by then. Do they mean gigabit up and down? I don't know if they mean up and down. It could just be down. Like Xfinity for the longest time said they had gigabit, but that only meant 40 up. Theoretically, I could imagine that would mean gigabit up, but they haven't said specifically down and up. But as long as it's more than 40 up, it's better than Comcast for me. So that's why I'm excited about it. And I'm very glad to be done with Comcast. Man, did that whole video about them. They were crazy. Jasper Clark says, I have a Volkswagen e-Golf. It holds up fine in the city, but not the best range, of course. A painful 160 miles, but it works most of the time in Britain. Not that much long distance driving. I'm leasing it. Yeah, I mean, it's not great compared to a $40,000 Tesla, but that's probably not what you paid for the e-Golf. I don't know what they cost there. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge portion of driving. There's some people that hardly ever do road trips, and the majority of the average drive per day, I think in the United States, is around 30 miles. Average per day, people are driving around 30 miles. So if you can get 160 miles per charge, it's really not that bad. I think people are kind of addicted to high range on their gas vehicles, and they keep thinking that there's no way they'll ever be able to use an electric vehicle if the range isn't as good as their gas vehicle. Even if it's like not exactly the same. Like I know people that are like, oh, the Model 3 is 350. My gas car gets 400. Doesn't work. See, can't do it. But it's like people don't understand that not all range is created equal. Like your gas car range is from the gas station, not from your house. An electric vehicle you can charge from home. At least from what I've seen, around like 80% of EV charging is done from the home, not from a charge station. And that opens up a lot more conveniences because right now, if I drive my car till the range is really low and I only have 40, 50 miles on the tank, it doesn't matter if it's sitting in my garage for a week. It's still going to have a low range the next time I go out there. Whereas with an EV, as soon as I come home, I can plug it in and it's going to have its full range or 80% or 90% of its range because you don't want to go to 100% every time. It's bad for the battery. But typically the car has things built in to help preserve battery health. And you can leave range every time because it's trickle charging at home. It's not charging fast, but you can plug it in and leave it plugged in as soon as you get home from work. And then that's charging all throughout the evening and all night. Oh no, we lost Starlink. Come back. Sorry, the lag. Oh, it's coming back. There we go. Sorry. I saw it hit 0 and then it bounced right back. So yeah, sorry. During the beta, the Starlink connection will still do that, but they're working on it. They'll figure it out. Do you think Starlink will get cheaper in the future? It could. The purpose of Starlink is to help fund SpaceX's mission of getting humans to Mars. So if not enough people are signing up for Starlink and there's just not a ton of people paying for it, then the money they paid to get all of the satellites up there, it's not like they can just take all those satellites down, and it's not like they can just reuse those satellites for some other purpose. They're going to price it exactly how they need to price it in order to remain profitable. So the whole point of Starlink is to, create another form of income for SpaceX because they're going to need a lot of money to build a bunch of starships to get to Mars. So basically, right now it's $99 a month, and the upfront cost is $588. That includes shipping and tax and everything. They say it's 500, but once there's tax and something to keep in mind, I'll bring this up in my review because there's not that many people watching this, but when I do my review, I'm going to try to cover everything, all questions and all concerns people might have. But the first upfront cost of the dish and everything, $588, that does include the first month of service. So it's not $588 and then once you install it, you got to pay $99 to turn it on. It's like $588 includes your first 30 days of service, and then 30 days into the service, then it's another $99, and then it's $99 a month. And the good news that I've discovered after being on Starlink for about a month now is it's actually $99. It's not like $99 plus a service fee plus sales tax plus additional fee, which is what Comcast did. Annoyed the crap out of me. They would just be like $110 or $140, but then there would be a fee, service fee, then there's some taxes on that, and it ends up costing $145, $148 because there's all these extra fees. Starlink, like the actual charge on my credit card, $99, 0 cents. It was just complete honest, which was nice. So I believe you do own the equipment, but from what I've seen, you don't have to send it back if you cancel. But right now, there doesn't appear to be a way to pause service, which is why I'm not going to find out what happens if you do cancel. Right now, if you cancel service, you can't get it back until some other undisclosed date. They're not saying, but I looked in the Q&As and they're just like, because, you know, some people are saying, I have a cabin that I live in for 6 months out of the year and I want to use Starlink there, but I don't plan on using Starlink 6 months out of the year. Can I just not pay for it for those 6 months because I'm not going to utilize the service? And right now they don't offer that. So if you cancel the service, you don't get it back until some other point. I have to imagine eventually they're going to start allowing you in, because otherwise you have this big $500 satellite dish that can do nothing. Maybe you could sell it, but I don't think you can just get the dish and instantly sign up to the network. I don't think it works that way. So, wow, Craig Lambert, thank you for the super chat. He says, I enjoy the channel, even though I'm an Android fan. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Craig. Are you I'm sorry if I got this confused with another Lambert, but are you one of the electric journalists? Or am I thinking of someone else? Oh, I'm thinking of Fred Lambert. Sorry. Are you Fred's brother? I was just thinking because he does a lot of the articles for electric. Anyway, let's see. Xfinity, for some reason, put the megabits higher without changing the price just recently. They should have done that a long time ago. Put the megabits higher. I never got the speeds Comcast said I was going to get, which always annoyed me. And the price of the service always ended up being way more than what they claimed it would be. When the beta period is over, will the dropping of signal still happen? I don't think so. I think the eventual plan is that there won't be any dropouts. It's just the only reason they're letting people sign up for the service now, but not letting anybody do it. That's why it's considered the better than nothing beta, is because there are these dropouts. But yeah, when it's out of beta, I think this summer they've started taking pre-orders for Starlink for anybody. I think it costs like $99 to make a reservation. Those people have been given a timeline of mid to late 2021. So depending on how the Starlink launches go, it should be between maybe August and December that it's out of beta. So by then the dropouts shouldn't be happening. Or if they do, they're very rare. Like Comcast would drop signal too sometimes. It's like no one's perfect. But Joseph says, is it getting faster already or are the speeds the same? I've noticed the speeds get faster just in my first 30 days, which is kind of crazy. Like when we first set it up, when I first installed it and first put the dish on the roof and we first connected it to everything, I was getting around 100 down. But then a few weeks later, I started getting well over 200 down. And I was like, oh, wow, it's already improving. But today I was getting more like 150. So it's very spotty right now. That's to be expected with beta satellite internet service. But the fact that I can run my network off of it, I think is pretty impressive. Knowing that it's only going to get better from here on out is pretty cool to know that, like, okay, I'm still uploading all my videos. I'm still able to do live streams. Yes, there's some choppiness and yes, there's some frame drops, but I can still do them. And my wife can still work off of it and I can still work off of it. And this is the worst it's going to be. A year from now, it's probably going to be, more than twice as fast. Jaden says, "Hey Drew, do you think Starlink will beat Comcast and AT&T and force them to bring better speed and better prices?" Not really, because Starlink is targeting more rural demographics of people who don't have access to fiber optic internet, which I think Elon has been on the record saying that traditional fiber optics is still going to make more sense if you're in an area that has it. So, like in a demographic where I live, I bet a lot of people would still not get Starlink because we have access to services like Comcast, and most people don't need the high speeds that me and my wife do. You know, I really cared about upload. Only reason I got the gigabit plan with Comcast was that was the only way to get the highest upload tier they had, whereas Starlink doesn't have any tiers. It's just you're on or you're off. And if I was an average consumer who wasn't uploading content or live streaming all the time, I would probably get by with one of Comcast's far cheaper plans that only gives 100 down or 200 down for like $70 a month, which some people have, and that's obviously cheaper than Starlink. But the main reason I wanted to get on Starlink... Oh, sorry. I'm waiting for it to find its satellite. Come on, OBS, you can do it. All right, it came back. So it's more affordable than Comcast's gigabit plan, but it is not it's not the cheapest internet in my area, basically. There are base level tiers of Comcast that are cheaper than Starlink. It's just the speeds won't be as good. That's essentially how it works. You are basically funding a Mars mission. Yes, that's the way I love looking at it. It's like I've talked about, I believe wholeheartedly in the vote with your wallet mentality of like, if you don't want to support a business treating you a certain way, if you don't like how a business is advertising to you or treating you as a customer, then you should not reward them for it. And I'm the type of person that would be willing to take a hit in reliability and performance if it meant that I was supporting a brand that I had more faith in and that also could save me money. Like a prior example of this would be me switching from Verizon to Mint Mobile. Verizon's account management and everything was very confusing. Their service was very expensive. And sure, it was probably the best. Their speeds were good. Their coverage was good. But I hated how much they were costing us, and I hated their business practices and how complicated they made their website and account management, to the point that, you know, I'm a techie person and I was having a hard time understanding how to manage different plans, and I didn't like how they were treating my parents that had been using them for years. So I was like, I'm taking my business elsewhere and I'm going to Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile's coverage and performance is not as good as Verizon, but it was good enough that I could work with it and I could live with it. It's not a noticeable difference to the point that I feel like my phone's slow all the time. It was like, if I'm using my phone cellular, I'm probably watching a YouTube video or checking email or FaceTiming someone. And as long as I can still do that with Mint Mobile, I don't care if it's the difference between 50 down and 80 down. You know, it's not like a feature differencing amount of speed. So that's why I was comfortable ditching Verizon. And it's a very similar situation with Comcast versus Starlink. I'm very happy with SpaceX because they're a company I believe in, and I want them to be able to build more rapidly reusable rockets, and I want people to go on Mars, and I support the idea of private companies pursuing this instead of government agencies, because government agencies have to work a lot slower, and they usually are a lot more bloated, and they have to spend a lot more money, and it doesn't feel as sustainable to go with a lot of single-use rockets like NASA does, whereas SpaceX is trying to make something that everybody can take advantage of, space travel, and it's not just for astronauts, it's actually for like everyday people. So yeah, it's like polar opposites. I despise Comcast and I'm absolutely in love with SpaceX. SpaceX would be like probably my top 3 favorite companies in the world. I would be like up there with Apple, Tesla, SpaceX. They're my top 3 pretty much. And I would probably want to support SpaceX financially, even if they weren't offering a service. If SpaceX had a Patreon page, I would more than likely subscribe to it. So the fact that they can offer me a service that I very much plan on using, and I can pay them for it, and they can make a profit off that and use it to go to Mars, wonderful, fantastic. But a lot of people aren't going to want to support SpaceX for that reason. They're just going to want the best possible service. And fiber optic internet that's available for cheap in major cities and more populated areas, that's probably not where Starlink's going to do very well. Like Sam from iUpdate, we were talking to him a couple weeks ago. He gets fiber internet where he lives, which is like 1,000 down, 1,000 up, and it's $70 a month. So for someone like Sam, Starlink isn't a threat. He should not switch to Starlink, and he would have no interest in using Starlink because it's more expensive and not as fast. So there's going to be a lot of people that live in places like that where you can have high-speed internet for cheap. But there's a lot of places where running fiber optic internet is never going to be practical, like in rural communities. Not too far from where I live. I live in a pretty rural community myself. I'm just at the very tail end of where Comcast runs cable. There's people just a few miles from me that don't have access to Comcast, and that's why in a place like where I live, Starlink is a major game changer. Let's see. I hate that Starlink is connected to your location. You cannot move with your Starlink. It won't work. Right now, you can't. Well, it's kind of based on a certain area. They say you can't transfer addresses right now. Again, it's in beta. That's not fixed. Elon has been very vocal that in the future, you'll be able to take it wherever. In fact, they've already made FCC filings for Starlink to be attached to moving objects like boats, planes, and even large vehicles, not little personal cars like Teslas, but maybe something like a semi-truck you could attach it to. So yeah, long term, right now, no, they're not going to let you move around with it. But I've seen people in the subreddit take their Starlink dish several miles away from their registered address, and they can still get a connection. So if you leave like a certain radius, it'll stop working, but it's like a general connect to. Long term, yeah. Eventually, a year or two from now, you'll probably be able to take it wherever you want. That'll be cool. Because the main goal with Starlink is basically to just have global coverage. You can just take it wherever. You'll be able to have your one dish and attach it to wherever you go and have the same connection, as long as you got a pretty clear shot of the sky. Let's see. I just need Starlink for 2 to 3 weeks a year at my grandma's house in Italy. There you go. They'd let you sign up for it for 3 weeks. Let's see. Joseph, Starlink keeps getting faster the more satellites they launch into space. Yes, that's true. The connection gets more stable the more satellites they have. Let's see. Oh, Suleiman says, need to go to bed. He's probably long in bed by now, but okay, good night. Let's see. I barely use data speed, so it isn't a problem. Yeah, download is always overrated in my opinion. I never need that much download in the first place because all I really use download is like streaming movies and YouTube videos, which does not require a high bandwidth speed. I guess if you played a lot of games on a console, having a super high download speed would be helpful because if you download like certain games on consoles are like 60 gigs or 100 gigs. And if you have slow internet, it can take forever to download those games. But if you have super fast internet, I guess it wouldn't take that long. But I don't play any games anymore. I just don't have the time and haven't had the interest to play many games. So for me, having like 1,000 download and having 100 download makes basically no difference. I don't notice if it's 100 or 1,000 because I'm still just going to be streaming videos and downloading occasional files, but never huge. I'll occasionally download a JPEG or a video, but because I'm editing one, but it's very rare and they're usually never that big. So no, download is the least of my worries. Upload is everything for me because upload dictates how high the bitrate can be for my live streams. It dictates how quickly my videos can be posted. It's such a large variable for a content creator to have good upload speeds. And Comcast did not have stellar upload at all. Not much better than Starlink. Starlink is a little bit slower right now, but I know it'll get much faster, so I don't care. How are the fruits you and Louise picked this week? They're good. We're almost through them. We ate all the kumquats, which are very sour but sweet at the same time. They've been like an amazing snack after work. Every time we finish work, we'll just chow down on some kumquats. And I love how easy they are to eat because you don't have to peel them. and we did have a bunch of oranges and mandarins. We still have some grapefruits, but yeah, they're delicious, and they were free, which is nice. Can we have more Taylosive space vids about your opinions and concerns about the Mars mission and SpaceX future plans? Yeah, I mean, the reason I always said the Space Channel, I won't promise if it's super active, is because I can't think of a ton of videos all the time. And I don't have a ton of time in my day to do in-depth research on a lot of the things I'd like to talk about. And there are definitely questions I have about the Mars missions, but I don't have a lot of answers. And I wouldn't want to make a video that... I don't want to make a video that's asking a bunch of questions if there's already answers and I just don't know about them. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to just do a video about, here's what I'm worried about. But yeah, I've brought it up on, I think, the Space Podcast before. I'm not even sure if that episode ever went up, but I remember talking about it in a podcast with Nick once where I was just like, I have full confidence that SpaceX will technologically figure out a way to bring people to Mars, but it's more the people I'm worried about figuring out how to put, 30 to 40 strangers into a tube for 2.5 years and they don't lose their minds and they don't want to be at each other's throats and there's no law enforcement up there. So it could potentially become very barbaric, as in if one person on that mission decides that they want to be in charge and they're going to beat up anybody who questions them, there's nothing we can really do about that because they're so far away that we can't, send up law enforcement. We can't put them in their place. So figuring out some kind of law of accountability if someone loses their mind or if someone becomes tyrannical, it's more the humans I'm worried about. There's already enough dangers with just putting a bunch of people in a rocket ship and flying them all the way to Mars. But I think the mental side effects of being in a tube like that for extended periods of time, we really don't know what that's going to be like. Like, people who spend extended periods of time on the space station are still able to communicate in real time with their loved ones at home. Like, they can communicate with people on Earth. They can have phone calls. They can even have video calls from the space station because, relatively speaking, they're not that far away. You can have in real-time communication. When you go to Mars, you're not going to be able to have phone calls anymore. You can't have FaceTime calls because even if you had a perfect internet system that could send a laser beam from Earth to Mars at the speed of light, it would still take 8 to 15 minutes for the signal to get there, which means that you'll be able to send text messages and maybe photos and occasionally videos, but for the most part, you're not going to be able to have IRL, like just in real-time conversations when you're on Mars, which I think is going to give a huge disconnect from everybody you know, everybody you love and care about, and you're not going to feel very connected, and you're basically going to be living in a little metal tube for years, and then when you get on Mars, you're going to be living in a desert where you can't go swimming. You can't. Man, this podcast is getting dark and physically dark at the same time. You're gonna basically have to put on scuba gear anytime you want to walk around outside. And I think the novelty of being on another planet, it's gonna wear off pretty quickly. Like, it'll be a really amazing moment for humanity when we finally step foot on another planet, but the people who do step foot on the other planet are going to have to be there for a long time. And it's not like an airplane where you get on and, okay, there's a crying baby, or this guy who's sitting next to me is really annoying, but I can just sit it out for 12 hours if I need to, or however long the flight is, and then I'll be done. Whereas Mars, if you're sitting next to someone that's annoying, or if you can't stand something about someone, you're going to have to put up with that person for years. And there's no backup plan. You can't be like, I want out, I want to go home. You can't. There's no way. So the mental toll that might take on human beings is what scares me, I guess. Deserts can be cold, Grant. Desert just means dry. Desert doesn't mean hot. There are lots of cold deserts. That's a thing. In Hebrew, kumquats are called Chinese oranges. I have a tree in my backyard. The problem is that the wasps and hornets just love the tree. Oh, that's not good. I didn't know that. Chinese oranges. That's interesting. Huh. getting any hamburgers later. Yeah, we kind of maxed out our food budget this month, to be honest. Um, so essentially, it was someone's birthday at the beginning of the month, and they invited us to this outdoor seating, fancier restaurant, and masked up and everything. But uh, we went there, and the restaurant was very fancy, but we paid for ourselves, and it was pretty expensive. And we're trying to keep our food budget under $200 this month, and we've kind of maxed it out between our groceries and that was like $40 meal, just that one place. So that was nearly like a quarter of our entire food budget. So now we've got 11 days left in the month, and we're basically just going to try to eat everything we can. But we have the stuff to make burgers. Louise made burgers last week, and we still have some. So we'll probably have a little bit next week. But yeah, she makes amazing burgers. So not going to go out to eat anytime soon, that's for sure. Not until April when our food budget resets. Isn't Antarctica a desert? Yeah, technically. Well, I think a lot of it's still kind of wet. I think part of training is mental. For the Apollo missions, they had the astronauts in the capsule for a week or so without getting out. Well, that's easy compared to Mars. The Apollo missions only lasted about a week or two, I think. They weren't gone that long, and you could have a phone call with everybody at home easily. The Apollo missions required a lot of training, yes, but relative to how long a Mars mission would be, that's nothing. It was trivial. They have to consider things like mental health, but my point is you can't ever get an accurate test. The simulations can do their best to emulate what it'll be like to be on a rocket ship for years at a time and be stuck with the same number of people for years at a time, but they will never truly grasp the actual reality of it, which I think will treat the human mind way differently. If you lock a bunch of people up in a testing facility and say, okay, you guys are going to be the mental health testers for the Mars mission, or you're the first astronauts that could go to Mars, so we need you guys to be testing for a few years what it's like to be completely disconnected from humanity, those guys know that if they want to, they can back out. They know that if they ring the bell, if they start hurting each other, if they start going crazy, they'll be let out, and they'll be like, whereas if you were in the situation, oh no, Starlink's looking. I'll give it a minute. Skylab, which was, come on, OBS. You can find it. You got this. Oh, it's right back. Okay. Starlink was just looking for a satellite. Okay. Not big, long missions, except Skylab missions, which was a couple weeks. Yeah, even a couple weeks is practically nothing. But if you're in a testing facility, if you're out being, tested on of like, okay, what happens to the mind when you're cut off for a huge period of time, you can escape when you need to. You could back out if you started hurting your other test mates. They could intervene and say, okay, experiment failed, stop. Whereas if you were in the actual situation and you are actually on the rocket, you can't back out. There's no plan B. There's no escape pod or anything. There's no like, I want to go back home now. I want to go back to Earth. There's literally no way out. So if just one person loses their mind and goes crazy on this trip, which honestly I think is possible because it's not going to be an experience any human being has ever gone through before. No human being is going to be this detached and this separated from the rest of humanity before. Once they hit that point, if they lose their mind and start attacking or harming their other crewmates, there's not going to be a way to stop them. There's not going to be like some kind of external force that can step in and say, okay, he's not suited for this, put him in jail. Or that's why I've talked about like bringing weapons to space, which sounds very unnecessary or sounds like a bad idea. But if they had like a gun that was locked up in a safe, man, the sun is so bright and so dark at the same time. If they had like a gun in a safe lock that several people had to activate at the same time, like you couldn't just have one person access the gun, but you could have like 4 people. If they all put their fingerprints on the safe at the right time, then the gun unlocks. But if you don't have all 4 people do it, just because you would need to give some kind of technological advantage to someone on the ship if one person was trying to enforce a tyrannical leadership and they were just like, I'm in charge, and if you don't want to follow my advice, I'm going to hurt you. You would need some kind of advantage. You would need some weapon to use against them. So making some kind of weapon that no one has access to by default, but if a majority of the crew decides to activate, then they can access it. Something like that. I don't know. Chris Norton super chatted again. Chris Norton's always super chat. Hello, thank you. Do you think they'll take a therapist with them? I don't think it'd be a bad idea. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is that they kill each other. Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, I wouldn't say that as like worst thing that could happen. That would be a very depressing and very terrifying first mission to Mars. Imagine if the rocket landed and everything, but they just kill each other because they lost their minds. Therapists could lose their mind too. It's true. Fun fact, the Note 4 fingerprint scanner makes you slide your finger across it. You can't rest your finger on it. I remember that. I remember when that phone came out and they were like, see, we have a fingerprint reader. You just have to slide it to get it right. It was very weird. Isn't there like a captain or something? Yeah, but if someone physically decides to override the captain, what's the captain going to do? That's the thing. It could, ironically, the first mission to Mars could become very barbaric because eventually become whoever, it would be sad, but it could potentially become whoever is strongest on the ship decides what happens. So if one person on the ship doesn't like the way they're being told how to do things, if they're stronger than the captain, they can overrule him, and there's nothing the captain can really do about it. They don't want people shooting guns inside of it. If something goes wrong, you can risk depressurization. Well, it wouldn't have to be a full-speed bullet. Just some type of weapon that could, a rubber type of pellet that doesn't shoot at 2,000 miles an hour. Not enough to penetrate the interior, but enough to harm someone, and or like a taser or something. Doesn't have to be a gun, but some type of weapon. Ooh, that's dark. I know I would not want to be on the first mission, that's for sure. I don't know if I'd ever want to go to Mars, to be fair. Even if there was a set-up colony, and even if there was a civilization that was kind of self-sustaining and didn't need help from Earth, even then, I don't know if I'd want to go. Keep them in separate rooms that they can't really get out of, but can become transparent so they can interact. I don't know if that would help. That would almost make you more crazy. It's like being in prison. You're like locked up in a room and you can't escape. Imagine what that does to the human mind, just being locked up. Eventually, they're all going to have to get out. When you get to Mars, you're going to step outside the starship. So eventually, they're going to interact with each other. They just have to make sure everybody's very mentally stable, and also everybody on the ship is very comfortable with one another. It would not be like an exotic holiday. Going to Mars cannot be compared to anything on Earth, to be fair. Mainly because you can't back out, whereas anywhere on Earth you can change your mind. If you go to some island where there's no internet and there's no way to communicate with the outside world, you can decide, I don't like this. I'm going to buy a ticket back. I'm going to travel back home. Mars, you would not have that option, and you would be completely cut off from the rest of civilization. Not just your family, not just your friends and your loved ones, but like everything. You excited for a new movie to come out? You excited for that new iPhone to come out? You don't get to know about it. You're cut off. You might find out about it via some links texted to you after the fact, but you're going to be so completely isolated from the rest of the planet. You can't have a phone call with anybody. You can't have a FaceTime call with anybody. And you can't leave your tent on a desert planet without putting on a huge amount of scuba gear. You can't feel the grass go in between your toes. You can't go swimming. It'd be like camping in a place where you can't breathe for at least 2.5 years. Most likely it'd be more than that. Could end up being like 4 years. Said people who have been in prison for at least 10 years. Yeah, I'm sure that's what they do. Who here has served a 10-year sentence in jail? You're going to Mars. Yugi, what are they in prison for? Murder? Do you want to send a former convicts up in a big metal tube with other astronauts? That sounds like a terrible idea. What if Perseverance finds single? Oh my goodness, I can't keep doing this. I'm just closing the window. I'm gonna turn some lights on. I'm not gonna be live much longer. I gotta wrap this up here. Good. Let's see. People that go to Mars will have to get months or years of training before going anywhere. Yeah, definitely. Years, not just months. I would say years and years of training to figure out how to handle that kind of separation. Deporting someone to Australia is not the same as being completely detached from the rest of humanity. That's very different. The fact that you can go outside, even in the olden days, even like when they first discovered America, you didn't have to require like excess help to breathe. You could still walk around the woods. You could still go hunting. You could still cut trees down. Or even if they abandoned on a separate island out in Australia, you could communicate with a large number of people. You could wait for more people to arrive. You could grow your own food. You could walk around and explore, and you could go swimming and experience seasons, and all of that is gone on Mars. All of that. There's not going to be seasons. There's not going to be forests to walk around in. There's not going to be a bunch of stuff you can hunt and eat and gather food, and you're not going to be able to breathe without a huge spacesuit. And then when you're inside your little tent, it's going to be very small and claustrophobic, and you're just going to have a few layers of plastic and metal keeping you from dying of radiation. It's not just a fun little vacation. It sounds cool on paper, but it would be an extreme mental exercise and a physical exercise, because you'd have to be working out the whole time. Otherwise, you'd lose all your muscles. If they come back to Earth, they will definitely have severe rehabilitation. Yeah, that's for sure. Their muscles are going to be and their bone density is going to be all screwed up. So you're going to have to be working out all the time on the way to Mars and on the way back, and while you're there. And if you decide not to, you can get in trouble. And if there's anybody on that ship that even slightly annoys you, you can't get away from them. If you don't like your roommate, if you don't like your sibling, you can choose to not hang around with them. On a Mars mission, you wouldn't be able to do that. It's like you are forced to interact with each other because you need each other to survive, basically. I don't know how there are actual people who agree to go there for the first time knowing it's like a one-way ticket. As far as I know, that's not the plan, at least with SpaceX. I feel like SpaceX is closer to anybody when it comes to manned missions to Mars, and they plan on bringing people back, from what I've heard. They want the rocket to come back. It very well could be a one-way mission, but that won't be the intention. I think that intentionally from the get-go, they'll try to bring people back, but something could go wrong. It happens. But the first people who go, I think, will be well aware of the risks, just like the first people who went to the moon were well aware that they could die and they might not make it. Yeah, you can get to know someone. I'm just saying that's not the same as being locked in a tube with them for years and unable to get away from them. Very different relationship than just knowing someone from work, knowing a friend from school. Basically, I'm worried that humans are not mentally prepared for that type of deep space travel. And it's very difficult to test. It's almost impossible to figure out how people will actually react because simulations are going to handle your mind a different way. Your mind will think differently if you know it's a simulation. What if someone else on the starship likes the pixel? Yeah, exactly. Just any tiny little issue, you can't get away from them. That could easily cause people to lose their mind. Extreme cabin fever. We already have that in winter climates on Earth. People who are locked in their cabins for too long start to lose their mind. Now imagine if they were locked in a tiny cabin for years and they couldn't get out and the winter didn't end. And they could die at any moment from a meteorite or something. And they're in outer space and they can't call anyone. They can't keep in contact with anyone. It's scary. I don't know how comfortable I'd be with it until they have a very, very established society there with lots of things and entertainment you can do. Anyway, this has been fun, guys. I appreciate the super chats, but I got to get going. It's my weekend now, so I'm taking the next couple days off. Podcasts, though, will drop on Monday. Not tomorrow, but Monday. And I'll be back on Tuesday. So appreciate you all watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.